Welcome to A Matter of Perspective with Judge Derwin Webb. I am Judge Derwin Webb, coming to you live from the Fraser History Museum. We are honored today to be here today with a good friend of mine, someone that I normally say would need no introduction, but this is true. This person needs no introduction. This is Miss Nikki Lanier, the Senior Vice President and Regional Executive of the Louisville branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis.
I know. You want to take a break after you say that?
I feel like I need a breath. I feel like I need a nap after saying all that. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We've been knowing each other
much.
for a long time. And, you know, to be honest with you, I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while. We've been going back and forth as far as our calendars are concerned. But I have never had an opportunity to do research on someone with this type of experience. So I wanted to thank you for your time, first of all. But gosh, you've done so much in our community, away from the community. You know, where'd you get some of the ideas that you have right now of who you are? Let's start off. Where are you originally from?
Okay. I am originally from Hampton, Virginia. Here's my asterisk caveat with that. I regard myself as being from Hampton, Virginia. My parents moved around a little bit as I was growing up, and though I was born in Jeff City, Missouri, and I lived there for a little bit of time, I consider Hampton, Virginia my home only because that's where I went to middle school, high school, college. We stayed there the longest, so it's a place that, I felt like my rooting and my understanding of who I am and what I am to do in this world kind of was incubated.
You know, there's a book that I read to kids called May Amongst the Stars, talking about Mae Jemison and her rise to become an astronaut. And I think about you when I think about that book, talking about some of the things that you've done, some of the dreams that you've had. Can you tell us about some of the dreams you had when you were growing up as a kid? Because you've done a lot of things, but what did you want to be when you grew up?
So this is going to sound super crazy, but what I wanted to be was free. So I grew up with two parents who were really steeped, super involved in the civil rights movement in a very personal and violent way, both of them, to varying degrees. And I'm an only child, at least so far. My mother's 83. I mean, it could happen. So you never know. But anyway, I'm an only child. And so growing up, Derwin, I was like literally at the feet of my parents. Both of them moved through their careers in higher ed. For the most part, they built their careers in HBCUs. And that's really all I've known is, from a little kid, my parents have always taught, for the most part, taught on an HBCU campus. And so understanding what happened to them and what they were a part of in their teenage years and early college years and all the experiences they had around boycotts and sit-ins and protests and marches and voter registration drives and getting spat on and getting dogs attacked by dogs, like all these experiences, what I heard my entire life. And then you couple that with this amazingly beautiful academic insulation that comes from being a part of an HBCU community. Since both of my parents taught at HBCUs, like after work, my parents' friends and colleagues and the professor of this and the dean of that school, and they would come to our home, and that would be like the after work place where they would sip their bourbon and commiserate about, Langston Hughes or whomever. So that's what I understood, just like the plight of Black people and the reality that has beset us in the only country that we know, and how difficult it is to try to just navigate being both Black and excellent and desirous of a fulfilled post-slavery life still is so elusive. And it was elusive to me at a very early age. I was very clear about that. I didn't have any personal experiences around like that kind of overt racism, but good Lord, I heard it all the time and I read about it a lot. So what I really wanted to be was free and to help be an architect for freedom for Black folk.
You said something very interesting because my father recently passed away, and I tell people a lot that he was a little A activist. He would go around, he would be the kind of guy that would knock on people's doors and get a petition signed to just get the street paved or something like that. Yeah. And he wanted to be a part of the bigger movement. But you talked about your parents being a part of the movement and going to campus and things like that. First time I really set foot on a college campus was when I actually started being recruited when I was in high school. But you lived on
Yeah,
HBCU campuses. How was that growing up for you?
It was amazing. I loved it. I loved it then, and even looking back now, I have so much of a greater appreciation for it now. Hampton University is where I spent most of my time on a college campus. We had a home on campus because they both lived there. They qualified for whatever the program was that you can live in a faculty house. So I actually grew up right on campus. So, I'd walk out of my front door and there would just be droves of students walking around, talking about whatever classes they might be taking. So I was like really immersed in the kind of the Black college experience, even in 6th and 7th grade. So the marching band and homecoming rituals and the football team and watching the sororities during their pledge period, walk right in front of our homes while they were online. It was just absolutely amazing. And it was, again, it's just, I took for granted then how impressive it is to just be able to be in an environment where you see nothing but Black excellence, unapologetic excellence around you, from all walks of life, from every role on campus, every position that people held on campus, all the students, the teachers, professors, the administrative staff. I mean, these are folks who are brilliant, hailing from all over the world, right in my front yard with regularity.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, your parents had to be very intricate as far as your development was concerned. Are there any other role models that you can think of? Because obviously your parents, I can hear it in your voice. I've actually met them.
Yes.
But I can hear in your voice that they really stood out. Were there other professors or were there other people in your background that helped you kind of guide you towards a path that you are currently on right now?
Yeah. Excuse me. Without a doubt. Yeah, I'd say Professor Stotsky, Erwin Stotsky, he was a professor of mine in law school. I went to the University of Miami. And at that time, Derwin, I don't know if any of your viewers would remember this, but I guess it still is occurring to some extent today, but certainly in the early 90s, there was this huge dichotomy in South Florida: who gets political asylum, Haitian communities come in, Cuban communities come in, who gets to stay, who gets to go. And I had this professor in law school who would represent Haitian immigrants pro bono. And his worry was that, en masse, that more often than not, Haitian immigrants who were seeking political asylum were being redirected back to Haiti without much vetting or assessment. But in the same motion, the Cuban immigrants were being welcomed in, being beckoned in. And his argument was this was a facially neutral policy being applied in a racially discriminatory way, and how what he impressed upon the students is that, in a moment's notice, the United States government, via whatever agent, be it the Coast Guard or some of these immigration attorneys, in a moment's notice could change the trajectory of these folks' lives for generations, right? So that's wildly impactful. So anyway, I got an opportunity to really learn from him and work under his tutelage, and I helped him with not just me, a couple of other students helped with a couple of pro bono cases, research, and brief writing and stuff while I was in law school. And it really helped me understand another way of thinking about how to right wrongs and the impact of decision making, and the potency that we wield sometimes when we're making a decision in the moment based on oftentimes what is latent or overt bias.
I'm always interested in where people decide to go to school, especially professionals. For me, I'm a former basketball player, so at the time I was looking for a school that had a good basketball program and a reputable law school as well. So that's why I chose Louisville.
Yep.
It was close to home, so close that I could drive home if I needed to, if something happened, but not so close that if something happened, my parents wouldn't be there every day. There were reasons why I chose Louisville. It sounded like in our conversation that you grew up at Hampton. You went to school in Hampton. Didn't sound like you had much of a choice as far as a college was concerned.
Well, hold on.
I was going to say, go ahead.
Let me tell you, because there's actually kind of a funny story there. So I actually went away to school my freshman year. I went to North Carolina A&T, and I loved it. Aggie pride.
Too much?
Forgot about the whole going to class part. You got to go to class. You got to do your work. So my mama was like, look, you got 3 more months to get this together. And of course I did not in 3 months. So I came on back home and I transferred back my sophomore year. So I finished at Hampton. So I actually was eager to get away, so I thought. But coming back and going and finishing up at Hampton was probably the best decision ever. I loved every second of it, and it was good to be back home.
But what Miami for law school?
Why Miami? So I wanted an entirely different experience, geographically, culturally. As I said before, most of my life had been surrounded by amazing, beautiful Black spirits, Black bodies, incredible Black talent. That was not the case, of course, in my high school matriculation. So I went to a predominantly white high school, predominantly Black college, but both in Virginia for the most part, except for my stint away. But I thought, where else could I go to really get a really rich understanding of the rest of the world? And a campus that would have as much multiculturalism, like dynamic multiculturalism, as it has incredible academic experiences, and a place that I might actually live after graduation. So I actually only applied to 2 schools, and Miami was where I ended up.
Well, you majored in at Hampton. What did you major in?
Journalism.
In journalism. That's right. I did read that. You majored in journalism, and then you matriculated to law school.
Yeah.
I know for me that transition was a little bit tougher because people don't seem to understand it. They can't have a good appreciation for how law school actually is.
Yes.
How was law school? How was the journey from college to law school for you?
It was beautiful and relatively seamless because the University of Miami had a program called the James Weldon Johnson Summer Institute. And it was for Black students particularly who were either coming from an HBCU, or I think it might have just been an HBCU. But anyway, so they're coming to the college for law school, and it's an opportunity to study law the summer before law school started. I'm sure that was a cleaner way for me to say that. It took me forever to get that out. But anyway, it was a fellowship to study law the summer before law school started. And it was to assure persistence and throughput for Black college graduates coming into the law school environment. There was a worry at the time the University of Miami had about persistence and graduation rates with Black students. So it was, it was an incredible, wonderful experience. That cohort of folks that I came in with, there's probably 18, 19 of us. We're still very close to this day. All of us graduated, went on to do very well in our lives. So it was a really great opportunity to begin to kind of cut our teeth on the rigors of law school and the kinds of coursework that we'll be required to undertake.
What was your first job out of law school?
I worked for a law firm called Mack Williams, Haygood, and McLean.
Doing what?
Running around trying to figure out what I was supposed to be.
As we all did.
Getting yelled at because I didn't research something enough. No, it was actually a minority. It was a Black-owned boutique law firm that focused on labor and employment, employer side. They were headquartered in Atlanta, but they had this office in Boca Raton. So that was my very first job out of law school. And I started working there like immediately after graduation. Was working there the entire time I was studying for the bar and sweating all of that out. And then, of course, took the bar and ended up getting a regular full-time position there as an associate.
Well, as I researched, you've been secretary in a department. You've been chief of human resources. You've held some pretty strong positions, and now you are in the position that you're in right now. How did you actually get to where you are right now? As far as the position is concerned.
Yeah, I'd say, tons of networking. I live by LinkedIn. I really am probably unreasonably obsessed with that app. I have found it to be incredibly potent and powerful and having great efficacy in the way that I can both talk about who Nikki is professionally and in some cases personally, to the extent that, my personal experiential lens bleeds over into the way that I practice as a professional. But I spend a lot of time networking via that. And then, of course, I do what you do, Derwin, was just try to connect myself to folks in town and be useful in community on various boards and the like. So really, a lot of it was just by networking. So I started out practicing law for a little bit. I didn't spend that much time practicing law, a couple years, and then I moved to Atlanta and I worked in HR, and the balance of my career really is in HR. As a matter of fact, I still, even sitting here today, though I work for the Federal Reserve Bank, I regard myself still as an HR practitioner because that's really where I cut my teeth and grew my career. And I just love thinking about the way work works for people and how do we find restoration through work and how we edified through work and what work means. I love unpacking all of that and thinking about that in a meaningful way. So it was kind of through that lens and through that little way of thinking about life that I just moved through my career, worked for a bunch of different organizations, public and private sector, in human resources. Did have the great fortitude to be appointed by the governor as cabinet secretary as over personnel, which is basically HR for state government. So I did that for a few years and then heard about a role through LinkedIn in Arizona. So off to Arizona I went to lead HR for Maricopa Community Colleges, which is the largest community college system in the world. And then from there, I got contacted by a headhunter on LinkedIn for a position in Miami, coming back to South Florida, working with a company called Charter Schools USA. And then I moved back here, and I actually didn't have a role. I thought I'd start trying to do a little dabbling in HR consulting. Didn't work out that well, but I did a lot of writing. So I wrote a chapter for in an HR anthology, so I was super excited about that. But then I happened upon this opportunity through LinkedIn indirectly. I had a dinner party at my home, and we were talking about the unnecessary tension between the east side of Louisville and the west side of Louisville and how we can start bridging gaps. And so I had, invited some folks to my house to talk about what that would look like, and included in the invite list was the gentleman who was recruiting for this position. So who I'd met through LinkedIn.
Right.
See, full circle.
Right. well, needless to say, you're the first person that looks like you to be in this position.
Yeah.
And I know the weight that you have to feel being the first. I understand that. I know that you have to deal with equity and inclusion issues a lot of times. People seem to interchange those words. Can you give me your definition of equity and your definition of inclusion?
I'm going to answer the question by answering a question that you didn't ask, and I want to start with diversity.
Okay.
Because in my head, it is paced and sequenced. So the concept of diversity is kind of the rudimentary, very basic, elementary form of beginning your journey toward equity. And that is just bringing different people into the space, into the building, different color, different ethnic group, different gender, different background, different region, whatever. You bring in a group of people who are very different, and you're assigning value to the bringing of those folks together. That is diversity. Inclusion means activating and utilizing those talents, those skill sets, those lenses that you have now brought together into the room. And doing so while pushing against the designed deficit that we tend to attach to difference, right? Equity is proportional fairness that must take into account both the cultural and the historic pitfalls that have befallen a certain group, Black folk, and it works to remedy all of it. So equity, in my mind, is more likened to a kind of reparation-y type of position. It is about quotas. It is about set-asides. It is about singular, paced, sequenced treatment by virtue of the recognition of the cultural dynamics that have been associated with the group and how those cultural dynamics have been assigned, either been diminished or muted or vilified in such a way that it has held that group back. So you have to both stop the bleeding and treat the wound. So stop the bleeding, quit being racist, dismantle racism in all of the systems and the institutions and the behaviors and choices that were at manifest. That's stopping the bleeding. That's its own conundrum. But now we got to treat the wound, right? And the infection that has been left. And that's where the equity piece comes in. So that's how I see it.
Well, for the past 18 months, people have described what we call the new civil rights movement, or civil rights 2.0.
2.0, yeah.
2.0.
Yeah.
How has the past 18 months affected your job? Now, I understand that diversity, equity, inclusion is not the only thing that you deal with. I understand that. But in a sense, that's what you have to deal with too on your job. So how has the past 18 months affected what you do on a day-to-day basis with the bank?
It's helped tremendously, honestly. I mean, I hate to say it in that way because it's not that DE&I work is something that I have to do. I get to do it, and I'm privileged to do it. And quite frankly, I kind of insist on doing it. I think it's important to talk about these concepts in the context of macroeconomic policy, macroeconomic theory, because one of the things that I heard Congressman Yarmouth say years and years ago. This is way before Breonna and all of these incredibly horrible debacles. But I heard him say that it is in white America's best interest that Black America thrive. And so that is the theory that I rest my thinking and my practicing from the Fed seat on. So when we talk about macroeconomics, I don't know how you do that in a world that doesn't contemplate and give space for and acknowledge the real role of racism and what it has done to stifle an entire playing field for a significant group of our citizenry. So it's the last 18 months has really given me an opportunity to be so emboldened in marrying those concepts in front of every microphone that I can find. And doing so with the full confidence that as I'm articulating these points of view, it's not in addition to my job, it is my job. Mm-hmm. It's not in addition to the work of the Fed, it's just becoming the work of the Fed. So anyway, that's, just being able to position all of what we are burdened by from a social justice standpoint, from a criminal justice standpoint, from, healthcare inequities, social determinants of health, and discrimination in the workplace and professional muting and stunting, to talk about all of that in the context of the economic impact for all of us, not just the Black folks that are living under the weight of it.
I'm going to go straight attorney on you right now because, as they say in the courtroom, you opened the door. You said a word.
Come on.
You said a name. You said Breonna Taylor.
Yes.
So you opened that door for this conversation. Briefly, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but obviously this would be considered ground zero for the movement in Louisville. This would definitely be ground zero. Is Louisville, in your opinion, as we would say, woke? Are we where we should be right now based upon the incident that happened last year? Where would you consider Louisville right now as far as on the scope of the spectrum, as far as how we're doing nationally, globally? Where are we right now in your opinion?
Gosh, it depends on the day. I mean, I think if you'd asked me this yesterday, I'd say we're waking up. And today I'd probably say, I guess we're still asleep. So Louisville, before Breonna's murder, was still a city that had yet to reconcile and understand the impact of its collective social contract. So the social contract in Louisville is one that places high value on sameness, predictability, reliability, familiarity, and all of that together is assigned safety, right? I feel safe if there's a sense of connection based on familiarity, sameness, all of these things, right? Now that's not unlike some other cities that I've lived in, but the rigidity with which Louisville tends to, en masse, tend to anchor itself to those concepts makes it very difficult for someone like me to come in with my views and my perspectives and be welcomed professionally inside of our traditional corporate structures, because of the social contract is one that doesn't really contemplate Black excellence, Black talent. We don't place a value in that. We don't have lots of examples of where that has, where that's manifested in our corporate ranks, and certainly not in our senior level ranks en masse, across our corporate structure. So we've been burdened by what I call the Black bleed. We have a hard time holding on to Black talent. I think because of that, there's literally this 5-year churn, if you pay attention, where we bring in Black talent that is beautifully astute, well-rounded, well-traveled, went to incredible schools, great pedigree. They come here to be both Black and excellent, and they're recruited by their employer to be both of those things. And there's something about the Louisville way that sends the message that neither of those is really welcomed here. Your Blackness, not so much, and certainly not your Black brilliance, especially if you're coming to be transformational and kind of bucking the status quo. Now, there's examples where that's not the case, but I've been here off and on almost 20 years, and I've seen probably upwards of 25, 30 of my friends, you probably have too, come and go. And the theme, because we've done some interviews with them with the GLI group. Anyway, the theme is the same, and it's right. I can't let Louisville marginalize me. I can't answer any more questions about how I got where I am and why my hair looks like this, and why every time I talk, you tell me I'm intimidating. Every time I have a point of view, you tell me how scary I am and how I'm not a team player. Like I can't. I'm out. So they leave, and so I think that was already in place before Brianna. And now I think we have an understanding that we understand it, but I don't know that the understanding is really translating in any kind of pervasive, persistent change.
Well, based upon the last 18 months, based upon what you're saying right now, are you hopeful? I know some things have happened over the past year that has caused people to speak on issues that they were uncomfortable talking about. I think that in order to get through a problem or find a solution, you have to actually start talking about it. And now we're starting to talk about those things. But are you hopeful that things are about to get better? Because I tell people all the time, I can talk until the cows come home. But until you actually hear me and listen to me and understand where I'm coming from and willing to do something different, I'm just talking. So are you hopeful that things are getting better and can get better?
I'm hopeful because things have to get better. I mean, we don't have the luxury of apathy on issues of race and racism anymore. Putting on my Fed hat, when I look at demography, 2045, the browning of America is real. It is real, and it is consequential. So by 2045, we will be relying on Black and brown talent to buoy the sustenance of our middle class. And if we covet nothing as a country, we certainly covet the middle class, the health of that middle class. And we've never understood a life that required us to lean in any other kind of cultural dynamic in order to make up a healthy middle class. So, us getting this right, capital R right, on every dynamic, every spectrum, is of critical import to our overall economic well-being. So my hope rests in there being some viability to that argument, and maybe you can couple that with a social justice argument, couple that with what's the right thing to do argument, couple that with the business case, couple that with what Black people deserve, and then together we can cobble together a larger strategy to advance new ways of being in this city.
I've had a couple people that I spoke to about you regarding this interview, and a few successful people, by their own right, let me know that you were like a role model to them. I'm not saying that you're older, but we both have learned experiences. We have learned some things that we did right, some things we could have probably done a little bit differently. What advice would you give to your 10-year-old self?
Great question. I would say, especially at that young age, don't feel so compelled to shoulder all of the burdens around the movement. I was kind of fist in the air at a very young age for obvious reasons, as I've shared before. But, I had a great childhood, a really well-rounded childhood, but I'd be kidding myself if I were to suggest that even as a young kid, I felt a sense of obligation around being an agent of change for somebody on something related to the way that life is lived for groups of people. And I think I'd tell myself to just, chill out on that a little bit and enjoy more of just being a kid. And you don't have to take up the mantle for every single cause. Not every single problem is yours to remedy. I think that's probably what I would say to the 10-year-old Nikki.
Well, I have one last question for you. I know we're running out of time. I have so many more questions to ask.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't get a chance to get to them all. But if you had an opportunity to look into the future, who is Nikki Lanier in 5 years?
5 years, I want to continue in this work. I want to continue to be useful in some way in advancing racial equity and talking about its link to macroeconomics and helping communities and companies understand that, there is a different path, and that if we challenge if we challenge our belief systems, then think differently about what we're doing with this new set of beliefs, and then from that, then fashion new policy and new remedies to really assure greater equality through an equity lens that we all win. I'd love to be more useful in this space where I can help advance those kinds of realities for people who are assenting to it.
Well, I will tell you this. Like I said before, I've had the chance to speak to a couple people that were trying to give me a little information about you. Everything that they said was true. You are great. I will tell you that, not just because you're one of my friends, but because you bring something to everything that you do, and I can see why people look up to you. People hold you to the highest esteem that they do, and why you're a role model to so many people. I feel like I'm smarter just from listening to some, not only the research, but listening to some of the answers that you have for today. So I just want to thank you for being a part of the program today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
And as we always say, as we're about to close, it's not necessarily what you say. It's not a matter of what I think. But at the end of the day, it's always a matter of perspective. Thanks for being on here today.
Of course.